Hey. Hey. You need to wake up. Look, I know we don't know each other, but we don't have time. You need to get moving. I blinked awake in the darkness, unable to see her face. The room was small, barely enough room for the pair of us. Paved with stone and the concrete floor was moist, with a dripping source of water in the corner. A slate-covered door with rust around the door frame, with an equally rusted iron lock. The only source of light trickled in from beneath the slit under the door. There was no telling how long we'd been kept prisoner here. How do we get out? I felt her weight on my shoulder, her soft body on mine, and I could feel her hot breath on my cheek. I picked the door. We don't have much time. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I didn't have time to think about who I was or why I was here. Or who she was. Crawling toward the door on the freezing floor, on my hands and knees. My limbs ached with every step, and on reaching the door, pushing it parted to reveal a dark hallway, one I dreaded walking down. I couldn't see what lingered on the opposite side. My head spun. Rising to my feet was a gasping challenge while I tried to balance. I felt like they had given me something. My head ached. No, throbbed, and I rubbed it only to find it was wet with tiny, dry chunks. Looking at my fingers, there was a mixture of fresh and dry blood. A low whistling came down from the end of the hallway. It sounded like a mixture of a sports whistle and a long wolf's howl. Quick! We need to get out. I wasn't strong enough to fight back if needed, or to run. I could see the outline of her face, vaguely symmetrical features with a pair of large eyes and a wide mouth. She had dark, messy hair, and her eyes were wide with fear. She had an uncomfortable, overbearing grin. There was an intensity about her that I couldn't put my finger on. Peeking outside, the whistling finally stopped, and now closer. I could see 2 thick pipes down the corridor. The larger was on the bottom, while there was a smaller one on top. Maybe we were underground? It was cold, damp, and there was a metallic taste in the air. Hey, which way? No response. Glancing back, I saw there was nobody behind me. What the hell? Hello? Creeping back to look inside the room, to see if she hung back. Only to find it too was empty. There was a tight, twisting feeling in my stomach, and with a groan I decided to go down the left side, occasionally brushing my hand on the wall to keep my balance. My shoe splashed with every step that I took, only to realize the water was getting deeper. I could feel it up to the top of my ankle boots, staring down into the dark abyss, and unsure how deep the water went. A long, loud, crazy laughter echoed after the splash, clutching my ears to keep the ringing at bay, gritting my teeth together and waiting until it faded into faint rumbles. It was a feminine voice, the same from the girl. I wanted to call out, but didn't want to draw attention to myself. Taking 2 steps back, there was a breath on the back of my neck. I spun around with my fist ready to strike, and instead stared down a desolate, empty space. What the hell? My breathing was hard. And since one way was blocked, I decided there was only one way for me. Gazing down my only option with a groan, knowing escape brought risk, and made my way. Soon the splashes stopped, and I reached the open door. Staring inside, half expecting her to suddenly appear. Holding my breath, eyeing inside and finding the room was empty. I didn't know whether to be frightened or relieved. Moving down the length of the hallway, it was dry the further I went along, and mentally, I had images of walking down here until I starved and died. My skeleton found later on by urban explorers. I walked for an unknown amount of time. My vision slowly cleared, and I was able to see other than an occasional burst of dizziness. Inside the dark areas void of light, I held my breath, praying I wouldn't touch something or someone that could see me fumble about in the dark. An occasional, flickering light down the tunnel gave me a sense of hope. The faint outline cast a long shadow of my figure, and squinting my eyes to adjust to the light, feeling my aching wrists. The skin was raw, and I couldn't tell what made the marks. I must have struggled, but I couldn't remember. My shoulders and neck were tight. The muscles had been forced into an unnatural shape, and stretching upward, hearing a crack. "Do you think you can make it out?" I ignored it, pushing onward. The demented laughter followed me, giving the illusion she was everywhere and nowhere. Deciding to focus on logic rather than giving in to fear, I scanned the walls for outlines of doors or other hallways, or signs to lead me out of here. Any shadow gave me a sense of hope. Seeing a rusty pipe resting in view, it looked old with rust around the top and covered in a thin layer of dust. It wasn't lost on me how cliché this was, but it was better than nothing. Picking it up with a grunt, getting a feel for the weight, and carrying it into the fading light and into the darkness. A weapon was better than none. "Oh, are you planning on bashing my head in with that?" I gripped it tighter, my eyes adjusting to the minimal light. Each step was agony and fighting against my cramping limbs, my breath raspy. I felt something smooth rather than damp and wet when I checked the walls, realizing it was a sign. Wiping off the grime with my sleeve, seeing an arrow pointing in the direction I had come. Morgue. Images of old corpses filled my mind, laying limp and forgotten down below. I must have been inside an old storage or maintenance room. I had to be under a hospital, likely one of the older style ones, and it must have been abandoned. With a sinking feeling in my stomach, meaning that help would be more difficult. Still, I pushed on in the direction away from the morgue. There was natural light peeking through, and never in my life had I been so grateful for sunlight. The creaking door opened to outside gardens, and suddenly I was tackled to the ground. She was smaller than me, but stronger than I thought. I struck in her direction with a tire iron, only to receive a sharp, winding punch to the stomach, and leaning over, I wheezed. I swung again wildly, only hearing her laughter in response. My body ached, and soon, knocking me to the ground, she straddled me, the crazy whites of her eyes in contrast to the dark of the room. She grabbed my hand, smacking it against the surface of the concrete, slamming it down hard. I screamed in pain, punched at her only to secure my left wrist. Again, it struck the concrete. The crack was louder this time, and sharp, crippling pain pulsed through my knuckles and up my arm. My fingers released, and the weapon no longer in my hand. Instead, It was pressed against my throat while I gasped for breath. Do you think I was going to make it easy for you? There was a steely malice to her words. I punched her with my injured hand, this time connecting with her mouth, and it only caused her to grin. Her lips parted, revealing blood on perfect white teeth. Her wet tongue brushed along them, cleaning them, and instead of slowing her down, it only encouraged her. She enjoyed this. She let out a deep sigh, leaning down, and ran her forefinger near her lips to gather the blood. The same one trailed along my lips. I tasted the metallic taste and spat it back in her face, only to hear a loud, sadistic laughter in response. Get off me! Don't worry. The evening has only just begun. She grabbed my skull with 2 hands and smacked it down on the floor. My head spun, and each time I saw her blurry, smiling face down at me until my eyes fogged over. Then suddenly it all went black. I was running blindly. I couldn't see the walls surrounding me, when suddenly they were shrinking and I had to crouch. If my shoulder brushed on it, it would burn my skin and I'd hiss, slouching to avoid it. And finally, I was forced to crawl on all fours. I was forced to crawl, all in hope of reaching the end of a long corridor, when it locked around me, slicing and crushing me in half, bones and flesh breaking under the pressure. I pulled with my hands, trying to get my torso through, while my legs kicked aimlessly, while blood burst around me. I reached behind, foolishly trying to connect my bottom half to my torso. I awoke with a loud gasp, grateful to be alive, until I realized where I was. I was inside an old hospital room, laying on an obsolete bed with an uncomfortable paper-thin mattress, an IV stand with a bag filled with a strange liquid brewing inside the drip, and my bandaged hand lay, held down by limb restraints, and I growled, gritting my teeth in frustration. The hospital was eerily quiet, and there was only the faint buzz of machinery I couldn't see. The bright, near painful fluorescent light bore down on me. I couldn't see directly upward. My dirty, wet clothing was gone, and instead, I wore a crisp, clean hospital gown. My skin smelled of cheap soap, and there was an antiseptic aroma in the air. I didn't know if physically she would have been able to carry me all this way. How many people were in on whatever sick game this was? Curling my wrists, trying to loosen them to get out of the restraints, but it was no use. I was stuck. There was a large, double-sided mirror in front for observation, and I couldn't see inside. Anyone could have been watching. My bed was the only one in the room, with 2 large closed doors with windows for further observation. There were no chairs or signs. There was a window with a thin curtain I could see bars outside. Otherwise, I couldn't tell the time of day, nor could I tell which abandoned hospital I was in. I heard a loud knock on the door, and in came my captor. Now with clear light, I got a better look at her. Her hair was wild. Her black print shirt was faded, and I didn't recognize the band. She wore ripped jeans and was barefoot, unbothered by the cold. And over the top, she wore a blue nurse's scrubs that were pristine compared to her filth. A clipboard in one hand while she tapped a pen on the surface of it when she walked over. Good morning, and how is the patient today? She questioned with sickening sweetness, standing by my bedside with her pen ready to take notes. My saliva was thick and heavy in my throat. Coughing to clear it, I knew I had to alleviate my dehydration. Could I have some water? Suddenly she stepped close to me, that I instinctively jumped. "Aww." Her hand ran through my hair, nearly tenderly. "You'll get your water when you answer the question." My fist clenched, and if she noticed, she gave no indication. Finally, I forced them to relax. It was best that I play along rather than fight a battle I can't win. "My hand hurts a lot, and my head." "You took a little tumble and hurt your poor little head." She leaned down, her face close to mine, and placed a kiss on my forehead, gripping me by the hair by my messy ponytail to ensure I couldn't pull away. She wouldn't stop with that creepy smile. Her wide, bloodshot eyes barely blinked, and I noticed a pool of drool dribbling from her chin. "Can I have my water now?" Her stare changed, a grim look in her eyes, and her top lip curled, turning the smile into a sneer. "Has someone forgotten their manners?" There was no mistaking the clear threat behind her words. "Please?" I sighed, irritated at being treated like a child or a toy. I hated how I had to play along, just to survive. "Can I please have my water now?" She laughed mockingly at my expense. Her sneer relaxed into that typical sadistic grin, and she left the room. While happy I temporarily didn't need to deal with her, being left in an abandoned building wasn't my idea of fun. Staring up at the ceiling, my heart was racing and my breath was shallow. I wasn't left waiting for long when she returned holding a paper cup, holding discolored water, and instantly my mind went to it being her filth. When she placed it to my lips, pinching the tip of my nose and forcing my mouth open. Fortunately, it was just water. Although dirty, there was a distinct metallic taste to it, and I didn't want to think about the chemicals I had just ingested. Future me had to suffer for present survival. I drank it all, wincing while I swallowed it down, and watched while she crushed the cup in her hand. Tossing it over her shoulder, she sat on the edge of the bed, squishing my arm beneath her, and twisted the drip going into my arm, turning the needle under my skin, and giving it a few flicks with her finger. I could feel the bruising. Pins and needles crept up my arms and legs, wincing, nor wishing to give her the satisfaction of hearing me cry out in pain. I still didn't know what was inside the drip. I eyed it, hoping it was just old saline. She took out a large needle. Subconsciously I flinched while she held it too close to my face. She pressed the plunger, pushing out some of the excess, and it squirted into the air. I pulled my arm away, as much as the restraints permitted. She gripped my arm, holding it in place, and injected it. Slowly. Then twisted it inside my skin. Breathing heavily and gritting my teeth tight together, waiting for the end. She pushed the plunger far too fast, and I could feel whatever it was just seemed to sit in my vein. She smacked and rubbed it hard with her fingers. "What did you just put in me?" My eyesight went murky. I couldn't tell if it was from her or the dehydration. Abruptly she stood, patting my elbow fondly. "Now, don't you move." Walking toward the door without a second look, pushing a hand on the doors and allowed them to swing wildly behind her. They slowed, not bothering to lock it or check to see what I'd do. I noticed something small, metal near my fingers, that I didn't feel previously. Feeling it with my fingertips, turning it slowly. A hairpin? Curling my fingers around to hide it, despite being too convenient. Did she want me to make an attempt to escape? I hid it beneath me, the tip poking into my thigh, and I knew it would bruise. Since there was no change in light, I couldn't tell how many hours had passed, or even if days had gone by without me knowing. I'd blink awake with blurred vision, with a new threat to discover. I saw a knife or a loaded gun resting on my stomach, only to find it removed when I woke up next. A threat? The offer of a method to protect myself? Or I'd see a chair in the center of the room facing me, as though someone watched while I slept. Through the observation window wasn't good enough, it would seem. I fell into a daze and heard shuffling around the room. A pair of chairs and a side table were being placed facing the bed. Any potential sitters would have their back to the mirror. The woman, my captor, was not present. I caught a glimpse of my reflection. Dark circles around my sunken-in eyes. The once clean hospital gown was filthy, with sweat marks around the neck and underarms, and I felt the painful bed sores on my back and legs. The two men placed the items and swiftly left. Hey, come back. Did I just dream it? Come back. Again, I was left alone inside the damned room. My eyelids heavy, slowly blinking while I struggled to stay awake. But it was a futile battle. Sleep beckoned, my mind caught in a limbo, and when I woke up without the heavy feeling of the restraints on my limbs, letting out a hushed cry when I moved my left arm, when I realized they were no longer on me. The formerly dark room had a lonely light in the corner. The pin was gone. For the first time in God knows how long, the restraints were off my body. My limbs, they felt heavy, weak, rubbing my wrists together, my hands clutching the other for the first time in, I didn't know how long. I tried to sit up. My core muscles throbbed, causing me to flop back down. Rolling to my side, dragging my legs across until my feet touched the floor. I didn't know how much time I'd have. Stretching my arms, bringing feeling back to them, and stood on wobbly, shaky legs that struggled to hold my weight. Bending over with my hands on the bed, ignoring the wretched aroma from the mattress, and walked to the double doors. Pushing on one, expecting it to be locked and finding it was open. Peeking through it, the corridors were empty and dimly lit. Other than many dirty footprints heading up and down the hallway, there was nothing. No signs. Going to the corner of the room, leaning my back on the wall and exhaling slowly. All that mattered was I escaped. I just needed to make it. I can do it. I have to. Opening the doors and stepping out. It was dimly lit but cleaner than I expected. The nurse's station was empty. The whiteboard had a list of 7 patient numbers. No names. All but one at the bottom was struck through with a black line. Were they past victims? I kept walking down the corridor. Not all the doors were closed. I stared through the window of the double door, staring inside. I saw an empty bed with a dried blood stain coating the mattress and staining the floor. Stepping back, not wishing to share their fate, and continued down the hallway. There were doors on either side, an open window on one, and the room spun again. Resting my hand on the wall, panting heavily, my other hand placed on my chest, and squeezed my eyes shut to gather my courage. The dry bodily fluid staining my thighs left a hard, crusty shell over raw skin. I'd never been this disgusting before. Wrinkling my nose, taking in the heavy aroma of rotting meat and stale blood, covering my mouth, I didn't want to look inside the room. I figured each strike-through represented death. Who these people were remained a mystery. Were they kidnapped? Dragged here against their will? A long, mocking laughter rang out down the hallway. I stepped inside the nearest room, closing the door behind me, and standing in the corner in hope of not being seen, peeking out, waiting for when she would be seen. Where are you? Where are you? Did someone go on a little wander? The long, happy singing tone stung my ears. I was still too weak to fight her. I heard faint footsteps walking past, with that dreadful humming with every step. The fear heightened my senses. Soon the humming grew faint and moved down the hallway. Exhaling, finally able to breathe, I soon realized my breathing wasn't the only one in the room. It was slow, raspy and deep, turning around to see the bed occupied by a living skeleton. Under the bright light there was no hiding. The cracking, dry skin clung to protruding bones. Naked with no hospital gown, I couldn't tell how old the person was. Their mouth was open, gasping with thin lips, and they hadn't noticed me yet. The figure was a torso. The arms were removed at the root, and the legs received the same treatment. Blood and pus leaked through the filthy bandages that clung to flesh made one. I had to cover my mouth with my hand to keep quiet. Would rescue even be considered merciful? Or should I just kill them? The stifled gasp was enough. The figure turned their head toward me. Their eyes were gone, with skin pulled tight and a red scar crossed over each eye. The eyeballs were gone, and I wondered what the ultimate goal was. Their lips quivered, muttering under their breath, and all that emitted was a sad, animalistic moan rather than any understandable speech. I was determined to not share their fate. Facing their bed were 2 single-person seats and a small table in the middle. There were 2 stark white mugs on a small plate, with a stale biscuit in between. I pressed my fingertips against the surface of the mug. Cold, chill. They hadn't been used for some time. Inside there was stale coffee. Bringing it to my lips, the milk hadn't gone off yet. I took a mouthful, swallowing it and ignoring the taste. I needed the energy. The other one was empty, and picking up the hard, stale biscuit, taking a bite, and there was a crack. A sharp pain hit my gum when I held the broken tooth in my hand. I kept it, unsure where to dispose of it, and kept it inside my mouth. The other's whimpers were growing louder, and deciding it was my time to leave. Opening the door, peeking out, and seeing it was clear. Avoiding the footprints in order to not smudge them. Walking close to the wall, and running my hand on the old plastic rail. The ward and equipment all looked relatively new, made in the last 10 to 15 years. I found the only uncovered window, and hesitantly stared out of it, with my arms shielding my face, blinking at the intense glare of sunlight. No longer used to the rays. How long had I been here? My hand was gaunt, pale and bony. My fingernails had been removed, leaving nothing but pits, a far cry from what once had been. The hospital grounds looked normal. The lawn had been mowed, the flower beds tended to, and still, it was deserted. I expected an abandoned building with weeds, trash, and other items. I felt around the window still, using my palms to push, and found it wouldn't budge. Considering where I was, it made sense. In the distance, I saw it was surrounded by an iron fence, rather than a modern chain-link one. And if I could get outside, there was a chance I might be rescued. It gave me hope. I stepped away from the light with my hand resting on the glass, not wishing to escape the warmth until the last moment. Walking back into the darkness, and the aimless wandering began. Glancing up into the corners of the room, a dormant motion sensor with no light that lit up. There was a dusty security mirror in the corner, set up to show down 2 separate hallways. Closing my eyes, looking at the circular mirror and not seeing where she was coming from. Then I saw her, far too close for comfort. Her walk was surprisingly graceful. She held a scalpel in her right hand and walked in my direction, even raising her head with that unpleasant smile of hers. "Oh, Sasha, I believe it is time for you to go back to your room." Sasha? It held a hint of remembrance. I used to be called that. My name, Sasha Fortin. I expected a flood of memories to return, and I'd suddenly remember everything. Instead, I had to settle with a glimpse. If she knew my name, she must have known who I was in the real world. And if I escaped, she may have found me again, walking past each door, pressing on it, and finding most of them locked. The fifth door opened, breathing a sigh of relief, stepping into the unknown space and closing the door behind me, standing to the left side to conceal my shadow from beneath the door, covering my mouth to hide the panting. My chest ached and my knees loosened, causing me to slide down. The room was dark, small and filled with shelves with large boxes at the bottom, and with specimens of parts I didn't recognize, and one sad mop inside a bucket. A janitor's closet. My rapid heartbeat drowned out all the sound. I locked the door, but it wouldn't work if someone had a key. After several minutes of anxiety, curiosity finally got the better of me. Opening one of the boxes, and it was filled with a variety of folders. Opening some, flicking through it, and I saw an elderly man with the name John Smith crossed out with red marker. I kept going. None of the faces gave me pause until I found one. I saw her, my captor in here. Except here she looked sane. Her hair was groomed, her school uniform was clean, and, most surprisingly of all, she smiled normally, no demented smirk or grin. It said her name was Sharon Jones, and she'd been taken back in 2003. She looked like an older teenager, but was stuck in time. The images of her torture were shocking. Parts of her skin had been sewn while she was awake. Her body thrashed wildly, creating blurry images in this series of photographs. Most disturbingly of all, they sliced and stitched into her cheek muscles, permanently forcing them into a demented grin. She couldn't stop. I was thankful I couldn't hear the screams that I imagined would be echoing throughout the tile walls. Reading over her file, flipping through the pages, the multiple treatments said it was a success. Turning her into a monster was part of the program. 3 loud knocks. Whining, I stared wide-eyed at the door, completely trapped inside. "Come out, Sasha. It is time to stop hiding." I knocked things off the shelves to create a barrier between us. The heavy folders, jars of preserved pieces of organs, and smashed them on the floor, spilling out their foul contents. There was that loud, unhinged laughter. She kicked the door open, causing it to burst at the doorframe, and it hung idle. Stepping over it, there was that demented smile on her face. Sharon stood on top of the door, blocking the sole escape, then slowly walking down and held a filled syringe in her hand, pointing the dread needle upright. I held a photograph out to her while my hand trembled, showing her who she was. Her eyes briefly softened, yanking it from my hand and stared at it. Her eyes darted rapidly from side to side, finally settling in the center. They swelled, growing red, and slowly I realized that she barely blinked. I don't think she could cry anymore. Sharon met my gaze, parting her teeth slightly, and placed it in the side of her mouth, then slowly tore it, allowing the tattered pieces to fall to the ground, discarding it. It didn't matter. She lunged at me, and I fell back on the wall behind. Her hands went around my neck, squeezing tightly, and I saw the syringe. She noticed me looking and snatched it up, punching me hard in the stomach, lowering my torso down with a grunt. Using my elbow on the wall for support, I managed to turn her wrist to pierce into her neck and squeeze the plunger. An unknown hand used red marker to strike through the final number. The experiment was a success. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but there's a cricket chirping right when I'm recording the outro, god damn it. Anyway, what did you think of the story? Check out the quiz and leave your answer. I would love to hear what you thought about it in the comment section down below. Also, did you see the little chibi perchance? Let me know when it shows up. Also, did you notice the little Easter egg? 2 channel members' names were added to the story, so check it out. If you're a channel member, sign up to have your name added to a story in the future. The link is available down below. If you would like to join their ranks, consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter. Check out these amazing people. Thank you so much for supporting me. But I want you to know that viewing, commenting, and liking is still very much appreciated. Check out my social media down below, along with links to playlists for more spooky listening and my merch. Stay safe, my little spooklings, and remember, I'll be watching you.